deal. Right before the vote, you went on Meet the Press and said, I'm in favor of it. Why the timing, and why were you in favor of it?
Well, the timing was that I studied it very, very carefully, and at that point, the president had enough to, override a veto. But I thought we should do more than that, see if we can get over 41 votes needed to keep it from going to a veto. And the reason was I think it's a pretty good agreement. And when I look at it, the problem was to stop the Iranian program now, not the one that might exist in 10 or 15 years, but the one that exists now. The verification system is perhaps the most aggressive I've ever seen in my many years of working on arms control agreements. So when you get a country like Iran that has something like 19,000 things running, centrifuges running, and a plutonium processing facility, and they agree to cut the number of centrifuges by 2/3 and to allow us to put cement into the bottom of that plutonium processing reactor. I thought this is a good deal. So complaints...
So it wasn't just a better thing to do now that we'd gotten this position. This was something that was good.
It seems to me it was good, and not just we're stuck with it. And the other problem was that we had been working on this for 9 years with our allies. And if we had said, no, we don't want this deal, the allies are going forward anyway. They've already agreed to it. Mm-hmm. The UN had agreed to it. The EU had agreed to it. So it made no sense for us to back out. And not only did it make no sense to back out, it made lots of sense to go forward. People are complaining that, well, it leaves a path to uranium enrichment open 15 years from now. 15 years from now is a long time. And will the centrifuges that are going to be in storage be worthwhile at that point? Iran would be starting again from a much lower point. And I think 15 years of having some economic relations with the rest of the world will fundamentally change the thinking of whoever is in charge in Iran after the Ayatollah passes away.
Do you think that we could have a fundamental relationship with Iran over the next 10 years in terms of an alliance of interests?
I would never use the word alliance speaking with Iran and of Iran because, I've been burned by Iran in the past. I remember vividly the Iran-Contra controversy of some years ago. So I have no illusions about the Iranian regime, and I know that terrorism and causing mischief all over that part of the world is their, operational strategy. But this was the problem that was most important to the world, that they were getting closer and closer to being able to have the fissile material needed for nuclear weapons. And that's what I thought we should stop. That's what they worked 9 years to stop, and frankly, that's what we did stop. So I think it's a good agreement and worth the support of the American people. I'm sorry it got all tied up in politics and
Why did it become totally partisan?
Why does everything become totally partisan in Washington, D.C.? I don't know. It became totally partisan, and then, of course, Bibi Netanyahu felt strongly about it, and AIPAC got deeply involved. But I think, on balance, the president was able to succeed in getting the agreement in place, and all of our allies are working with us. And I think it does open up new opportunities, but I'm not saying it reflects a new total relationship with Iran. Let's just focus on this particular thing, make sure they do what they are expected and have promised to do, and put a verification regime in there that ensures that we can keep track of it. I've talked to the head of our intelligence community. I have talked to Secretary Muniz, our Secretary of Energy, and they're confident they can verify what's happening.
And you're confident?
Yes. As the Secretary of Energy said, you can't hide anything. He said, I can smell uranium 50 years or 5,000 years after it's been in a separate place. Right. It leaves a definitive signature that you can't really hide.
One reason it became partisan is a lot of your Republican friends who think very much like you actually, I would guess, were in favor of this deal but didn't say so. Do you have that opinion?
I have that opinion, but I will never suggest why they did or did not. But I felt that.
Why did they did it or did not?
Ask them. Don't ask me. I don't know. I am basically still an infantry officer, not a politician, and I have been with nuclear weapons since I was a young captain. When I learned how to use them. My first assignment was to guard an atomic cannon in Germany when I was a 21-year-old lieutenant. Mm-hmm. As a corps commander, I was ready in Germany to call up nuclear weapons if the Russian armies came through the Fulda Gap. And as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, I had 28,000 nuclear weapons under my supervision. I know a lot about this, and I know what nuclear weapons can do. And anytime we can stop a program the way we stopped a program, I thought that is a valuable result of this agreement. And I felt that I had an obligation from my military experience as well as my political and diplomatic experience to show my support for the agreement.
Do we now have a confluence of interest with Iran in stopping ISIL in
I
Syria?
think both of us have an interest in stopping ISIL in that part of the world, not just Syria. I mean, it's spreading all over the place. But I would not say that we're in alliance with Iran. It is with Iran over Syria. It's perhaps the most complicated issue I have ever experienced. And the problem right now is that we have to decide which is the first priority. In the military, we're taught to identify what is the main attack, which is the most important thing you have to do to solve the overall problem. And then there are other supporting attacks you might launch, but there are also phase 2 operations you might undertake. And right now, I think the main attack, what we have to focus on, is defeating, destroying, neutralizing, whatever word you wish to use, ISIL and ISIS. That's the real threat to the region. I don't like Mr. Assad. I've worked with him, trying to work with him, I should say, and he is a pathological liar. He's a devil. I'd like to see him leave, but while we're all hoping he will go away, let's think through, once again, my old Pottery Barn rule, what comes after him? Do we know what will happen when Assad eventually does step down, if he steps down either voluntarily or he's pushed out? Remember, he represents not just the government in Damascus, he represents the Alawites. And what will happen to the Alawites? So we ought to be very careful before we get too deeply involved in his removal. I know that we have said we want him out. I want him out. But I also want ISIL defeated as a first priority rather than focusing on Assad.
So you think the administration may be making a mistake by emphasizing Assad must go as a top priority?
I don't see anything wrong with that. And I think in recent days, the administration has been modifying their language a little bit. They're saying, well, maybe not today.
Right.
And we'll figure out a way, and we'll work with our friends and allies. So I think he will eventually go. But I think you have to be extremely careful. We thought we knew what would happen in Libya. We thought we knew what would happen in Egypt. We thought we knew what would happen in Iraq, and we guessed wrong. In each one of these countries, the thing we have to consider is that there is some structure. There is some government that's functioning, whether we like its form or not, whether it's a dictatorship or not. But there is a structure that's holding the society together. And as we've learned, especially in Libya, when you remove the top and the whole thing falls apart, and there's nothing underneath it, you get chaos. And not only do you get chaos, you get lots of people killed, you get lots of people leaving, fleeing. As we see, to get to a place that's safer and they're going to have a better life. Germany, United Kingdom.
Senator Corker this morning cited you, citing the Pottery Barn rule, although with all due respect to Pottery Barn, they say you don't have to really buy the
You're responsible for the Pottery Barn rule.
I know.
I didn't say it, you said it.
Right. This is a long time ago.
Well, what I was saying is if you get yourself involved, if you break a government, if you cause it to come down, by invading or other means, remember that you are now the government. You have a responsibility to take care of the people of that country.
And it got labeled the Pottery Barn.
Which is not bad.
But
Pottery Barn Company, after fussing, got a heck of a lot of advertising mileage out of that saying.
They had it both ways. But let's get back to the foreign policy of it. He said that we have violated that by going into Syria, going into Iraq, going in even to Afghanistan, going into Libya, and then leaving, not knowing what we're going to do. First of all, was it a mistake to go into all of those places without a plan for owning it?
There was a plan. The execution may have been very weak in some of them, but the reality is that we went in, say, Iraq and Afghanistan, and we stayed long enough to create a government, but the governments have turned out to be not as successful as we thought they might be.
So in retrospect, should we not have?
I don't do retrospect very well.
Yeah.
What's the point of it?
I take that as a yes.
No. Walter and I have been doing this for years. Just everybody relax. We went to the UN on Iraq because UN was the offended party, and it got a resolution, and we could have avoided that conflict if Hussein had met the standards that the UN put before him to tell us about your weapons of mass destruction.
Wait, right there, though. Would George W. Bush have been satisfied leaving Saddam Hussein in power had the UN
in
done
my
it?
conversation with the president at that time, he made it clear that if we were satisfied on that point, undoubtedly satisfied, then he would have not had the rationale to go in and to conduct the invasion. And it might have been ugly, but Saddam Hussein might have stayed in place. But nevertheless, he felt it was necessary based on the intelligence we had about those weapons, he thought it was in the interest of the world, in the absence of that kind of agreement, that an invasion was appropriate. And I supported him in that, because we tried the UN, and I supported him when that didn't work on the invasion. My greatest disappointment was that we did not do it well. We made strategic mistakes. The president was told for months that we were going to preserve the Iraqi army and not disestablish all of the Ba'ath positions. And then suddenly, one morning it happened, and it was not well coordinated. We had not considered the implications of what we were doing, and chaos ensued. There were other mistakes that were made. I'm a great believer in my own doctrine, the Powell doctrine, even though it's not an Army doctrine. It's just something I made up one day. And it was at the newspapers, it was the Washington Post that called it that. I'm like it. It's nice to have a doctrine named after you. But it says that, when you start out something, make sure you have enough force in place to have a decisive outcome. And we had a decisive outcome getting to Baghdad, but we forgot that the war was not over, that we had not put a new government in place, that there was still total disarray within the society. That's when we should have had the surge. We finally had it in 2006 and 2007, but we should have put the necessary force in 2003 in the first place.
But didn't the Secretary of Defense, Rumsfeld, say we didn't need that force?
That was his view.
And it was incorrect. What lessons from that do you apply to Syria now?
I don't really know how the Syrian thing is going to turn out. Air power, I'm a great advocate of air power. I'm also an infantry officer. And I believe that in a situation like this, air power has a role to play. Mm-hmm. While it's playing that role, it is also causing civilian casualties, and it's also destroying the infrastructure of a city. Mm-hmm. And say if I'm living in McLean and they suddenly start bombing in Falls Church, I'm leaving McLean as well. And so you have to understand that air power sometimes can be a very blunt instrument, and it causes collateral damage, and not just of killing civilians, innocent civilians, but what it does to the cities, to the water plants, to the oil facilities. It really does destroy a lot of property. And you can't be too specific. When I hear things like we have bombed a ISIS stronghold, mm-hmm. ISIS is a movement. Mm-hmm. It's all over the place. It isn't sitting around in strongholds. And after you have been in a battle with air power over you, about to hit you, you tend not to make yourself that readily available to be hit by air power. You'll notice in Kunduz, the city that's fallen in northern Afghanistan to the Taliban, they're not letting people leave the city.
Right.
Wonder why? Mm-hmm. They're hostage now. Mm-hmm. They can't be bombed because mm-hmm. they've got these citizens.
But let me go back to Syria. Putin has been saying some things, including, hey, we need to get a coalition together. We need to hold the Alawite regime together while we focus on fighting ISIL. Do you think he's making some sense, and maybe we should have some talks with him?
Well, apparently Secretary Kerry is having talks with him, and I think it's wise to talk to people. I went through my life always willing to talk to people. People I liked, people I didn't like, mm-hmm. large countries, small countries, because I think that's the strength of the American system. Not to brag about ourselves and go around saying we're indispensable, we're this, we're that, we're exceptional. Everybody knows that. We don't have to say it. Mm-hmm. But what we ought to do is, with a sense of our constraints and a little bit of humbleness on our part, talk to everybody in the world who wants to talk to us. Mm-hmm. You don't have to show off. They know what we've got. They know what we can do.
So what would you say to Lavrov if you were Secretary of State?
If I was Secretary of State, and I know Sergei very, very well, I would say, Sergei, let's talk. How can we find some way to make sure we don't run into each other as you start flying airplanes, But secondly, how do you think we can affect ISIL and stop their advance? Because the Russians have also said they don't want to put the troops on the ground.
And he would say you got to keep walking back that Assad must go statement.
I expect so, but we shouldn't be surprised about this.
Yeah, and you would walk it back then.
I didn't say that. I don't think we should abandon the position we hold, but we should not be surprised that the Russians, who have had an interest in Syria for 50 years, who have a naval base there, and who have been supporting Assad from the very beginning of this conflict 4 years ago, along with the Iranians, we should not have been surprised that he decided to raise the bid a little bit by putting in airplanes and troops. He did not want to see this regime collapse. One of the things that's possible is he must understand that Assad and the regime at some point has to pass on. And so why not talk to him about this and see what he has in mind, what they think.
Yeah. If we could shift to domestic on immigration, it's suddenly become, not suddenly, past 2 or 3 years, become this inflamed issue. How do we get beyond that on the immigration debate?
I think the American people have to understand we're an immigrant nation. It is our history. It is our tradition. If you look at what immigrants have done to this country, how we have been built on the backs of immigrants. And we've always had difficulties with our immigration policy throughout our history. You know, with the Chinese building railroads and how a number of Eastern European immigrants were looked down upon when they first came to this country. I'm a child of immigrant parents. My parents came here in fruit boats, United Fruit Boats, 1920 and 1924. There are zillions of people who have this story. The school that's named after me up in Harlem now, the City College of New York, is named the Colin Powell School. And 90% of my students are a minority, and about 80% say they were born in another country. And as you've been reading in the paper, the Asian influx that's coming on top of the Hispanic influx, and people from all over the world, we're going to be a minority-majority immigrant nation, but they'll be Americans by then in another 30 or 40 years. So we need a sensible immigration policy to bring these people out of the back. And if I was around Mr. Trump, Donald, who I know rather well, I would say, Donald, let's see what happens. Let's tell all the immigrants working in Trump hotels to stay home tomorrow. See what happens. Are you kidding me? When these folks leave here to go to lunch, look who's serving you. Guess who's cooking in the back? Next time you walk through Dulles or Reagan, look who's manning the counters. Look who's cleaning the place up. These are first-generation American immigrants who will raise children who will go up to higher things. They're not mopping floors and waiting tables so that their children can do the same. It's that immigrant tradition. Get started, and then the next generation will be better, and the generation after that will be even better.
Bravo. One last question. Okay. You endorsed President Obama, I think, twice. You just endorsed the Iran deal. You attacked now what has basically become the Republican position on immigration. Do you still consider...
I don't agree that it's the Republican position on immigration. I think most Republicans understand that we need immigrants. We are an immigrant nation. It is in our best interest to do it. But there are pockets, as I've said previously, there are pockets of intolerance within the Republican Party that the Republican Party had better figure out how to defeat that level of intolerance.
And are you still a Republican?
In the, you didn't mention the fact that I voted for about 5 presidents in a row who were Republicans. And I worked for President Reagan. I worked with Howard Baker. Yes, I'm still a Republican. In Virginia, you don't have to declare a party where I live. But I'm still a Republican because I believe in a strong defense. I believe in the entrepreneurial spirit that is so typical of the Republican Party in past. But I'm having difficulty with the party now. I think the party has shifted much further right than the country is, and it should be obvious to the party leaders that they cannot keep saying the things that they are saying and doing the things they are doing and hope to be successful at national level elections in the future, not just 2016, but in the future. So I want to continue to be a Republican because it annoys them.
General Powell, thank you very much.
Thank you.